Hello, everyone. I am Przemek Bosak, your host for today's Summer of AI event, and I will help facilitate it. This event is How Does Generative AI Aid in Historical Research? Presented by Dr. Robert Morrissey from the Department of History. This presentation showcases workflows and use cases to leverage an AI chatbot for research tasks and project development. Mindful of flaws and many challenges, I conclude that use of the chatbot for research tasks often extends my productivity and saves time. It also has helped me make significant research breakthroughs for connections. If you have any specific questions throughout this event, do not hesitate to raise your arm if you're physically in the room, or to place them in the online chat or the Q&A tab. The host will collect them, and the host meaning either I or Andrew Fenor. We will collect them and notify Dr. Morrissey. A thumbs up on your message or question will be used to confirm that your question was received by the host. Thank you and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you. Well, listen, thank you very much for this opportunity, for having me. Thank you to Siddle for running this series. I think it's valuable. It's a great time during the summer to kind of get a chance to think about something like AI. Felt like in the busyness of the school year, we had lots of conversations about the ways that the tools have been coming along and entering into our different practices, and especially with the Copilot subscription for the campus, lots of people using it. And yeah, so I'm grateful for the series, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share some of my own practices, some of my own experiences. Creating this presentation has given me a chance to really think through and sit down and kind of articulate how AI tools have and also have not become part of my research workflow, a reliable part of my research workflow for about the last year. I will share, I was a participant in the Copilot pilot subscription this year, starting in about October, I guess, is when I signed up for it. And then I became a plus subscriber to ChatGPT November, maybe December. So this represents, my serious engagement with AI tools has really only been, less than a year's worth of work. And like many, I would characterize much of my use of the tools as undisciplined and exploratory. Often my techniques have amounted to playing around, which is the term of art, I feel like, in a lot of conversations about AI at the moment. Low stakes, experimental, but meanwhile, it has been in research where I have found uses that seem more serious and sustained, if still evolving and definitely still experimental. I've definitely achieved some results, and so I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share some of what I've been doing here. And what I want to share in this presentation is not so much any specific research result. I could certainly do that, present the results of my AI leveraged research on especially two projects that I've been working on the most, on kind of front burner this past year. And in those two projects, I think it's fair to say I have some payoffs that could easily justify a conference paper, right? What I consider a worthy sort of scholarly contribution for my discipline. But instead of presenting research results, I figured instead that for today, I wanted to be more reflective. I want to look at the tools themselves, share my methods, and especially my intuitions about what the tools are becoming really good for from the standpoint of a historian. And most of all, I want to share what I think we all really need when it comes to AI these days, which are use cases and workflows. If not, what I've come to call discipline-specific lessons in prompt engineering, right? So, also by way of introduction, I think I'm addressing myself, especially as I've been kind of preparing this talk. I think I have in mind especially skeptical historians who might have so far been dismissive of AI as useless, or kind of so flawed with hallucinations and other problems and challenges that it's not quite worth the time, or worse, right? Just a shortcut for writing. And to these people with whom I definitely sympathize, of course, given how the tools have been showing up for many of us in the classroom, I aim to offer some simple suggestions of ways to use AI that have little to do with text generation, that is writing, and that portion of research, right? I'm also trying to offer something to those who encounter the chatbot and this screen that I have up on the presentation as a completely unintuitive tool for historical research. What am I supposed to do with this? Ready when you are, right? So to help, I'll share workflows and use cases to illustrate what I think AI does really well right now. The key insight that I want to share is that AI is a shortcut to datafying historical sources, right? Quickly turning unstructured texts, especially nearly any text-based source that you feed it, into structured data ready for powerful analysis. Indeed, the AI can often do useful exploratory data analysis that once took considerable coding skill, right out of the box. For many types of quantitative and digital analysis, it can speed the workflow considerably. For learning, for gleaning and organizing and digesting information in texts, I believe it is a super useful tool. So here's where I want to go today. First, I'll talk a little bit about myself, if you'll indulge me, and where I'm coming from, the kind of research that I do. And this is partially to share why I see great potential in the use of AI tools, but also to acknowledge that I know that might be unique to me and the kinds of things that I do as a historian. Second, I'll move into the heart of the presentation, share a couple of practical workflows. Again, this is not going to be true prompt engineering 101 for historians, but I'll try to illustrate a couple of, distinctive workflows that I've developed. And then I want to conclude just with a couple generalizations and open for discussion. Although I will mention, I'd love it for there to be discussion all along as we go here. I know that might be a little challenging with, the online audience and the chat, but if somebody does interject a question in the course of what I have to say, please let me know, and I'd be happy to sort of respond well before I get to the end of what I've prepared. So to get into it, why AI? And here's the sort of reflective part of this talk. I've been thinking quite a lot about this. Why use it? Why use AI in historical research? I think the answer to this question for me is rooted in very hard-won experience, right? Historical research is open-ended, right? And it takes a very long time. So after a long career of doing this work, I still get daunted and intimidated when I plan a new research article, and even a short article or project, let alone a book, right? I think of all the time that it's going to take. I'm a person who likes to think about time management and project management. Insights from an academic coaching program that I was lucky to take a few years back, the NCFDD, the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. I highly recommend that for anybody in the audience who's interested in time management. That experience, as well as books like, if you've ever read 4,000 Weeks, a best-selling book on time management, those experiences have taught me to try to estimate how much time I need to do anything before I commit to it. And when you apply insights like those that I learned in those, from that book, that the coaching experience, when you apply those lessons to planning historical research, or I think any open-ended research, the results can be pretty sobering. What's your pace of reading, right? Or even skimming, right? How many sources do you need to consult to answer a particular historical question? How many of those sources will lead you to others, right? And the biggest frustration, I think, for historical research for me over the years is that much of what you're going to explore in any given project, especially if it's targeted, if you've got a specific historical problem in mind, much of what you are going to encounter in your research is going to be sideways at best, but maybe more directly useless to your particular purpose, right? You've got to sift through a ton of chaff in order to find the wheat. And while you're doing that, hopefully you're going to stay interested in the overall project, but you'll definitely have moments of painful labor, just searching and scanning, following, let's face it, dead ends in your research. So again, this is the kind of utopian language that we hear from AI developers at the moment. What if you had a research assistant who could do that painful labor for you, particularly the fine-grained detail work, identifying and organizing the shreds of evidence that you might need to create a historical argument, right? I can put a finer point on the specific advantage that this would offer to me personally and historians like me. Indeed, part of why I'm attracted to use AI is because of the specific kind of work that I do. I was trained as a social historian, even a social science historian. That's a conference that I used to attend pretty regularly. My advisors coming up in the 1970s and 80s, they literally rewrote American history by focusing away from elites and notable persons and turning attention on regular people. That was a true change in historical research practice at that time. But realizing that goal was really difficult because regular people left very different kinds of records. They didn't leave no records, right? They were not totally absent from the archive, but their lives were revealed only in mundane and very prosaic archives, records of birth, marriages, baptisms, voting records, tax registers, timesheets, right? Showing amazing creativity, the new social historians wrote fascinating studies of the texture of everyday non-elite life by mining those kinds of records. But they all also developed really bad eyesight over the years, over the hours that they spent deciphering bad handwriting and compiling their research, right? I have an anecdote to share about how labor intensive this was. This man on the screen here is my advisor, John Demos. He wrote a book about Puritans in the 17th century in New England using methods like these, the new social history methods. So when he assigned that book to us, this book called Little Commonwealth, in his seminar, he pointed out a sentence in the text about, it was something about how the average number of children in every Puritan household in colonial Plymouth, Massachusetts changed over the course of 2 generations, right? And he said to us, and I'm kind of quoting from, paraphrasing anyway, "It took me 3 months of research to write that sentence," he said. Well, I was hooked on that, on that kind of a project. For some strange reason, I sit before you today as a person who wanted to do that kind of research. And it wasn't just the history that I found fascinating, it was the commitment to that kind of research itself, the methodological innovation and the detective work. So I started in on it and I did the same kind of thing as my mentor. In my case, I started studying French in Indian communities in colonial Illinois. I did a research article, a core of a book project on intermarriage among French and Illinois Indian families and the function of godparents in the community that they made, right? It was a sort of kinship structure argument. Then I went on to study Indigenous history more broadly, focusing on data sets like archival language documents. And in each of these cases, as well as in much of my other research, I became familiar with the excitement of exploring the random assortment of information that survived in those kind of quotidian, mundane records from the past. By necessity, I made huge spreadsheets. I learned techniques to quantify and glean material meaning from those spreadsheets. I datafied the unstructured texts that I found in notarial archives. I organized and I processed. And at every turn, I looked for ways to speed up those processes, right? By the time I started working here at U of I was learning digital history approaches that could algorithmically convert large corpuses of text into structured data for analysis. I learned techniques to extract textual entities like geographical names, proper names, etc., from those corpuses much more quickly than I could do by hand. I learned machine learning and predictive modeling for classifying and topic modeling those kinds of texts. And I did this thinking that many of these digital methods would one day replace or at least speed up the hours of time that I spent making those spreadsheets. Well, I think we're getting closer to that day now, right? There are many research tasks that I have done over the years that I can now do. I think I can say this pretty confidently. Research tasks that I've done that I can now do or nearly do with off-the-shelf AI products. And as handwriting recognition tools become better, I can see some of the tasks that took me months being reduced to hours. So, and if some of the analytical power of these tools will continue to grow, I'm already pretty excited with what I can do right now. So let me now turn with that as some introduction and just kind of where I'm coming from. Like I'm a certain kind of historian with specific kinds of, I don't know, research practices that I'm interested in. And I know this it doesn't apply across the board, even if I want to be pretty general in what I share from now on. Let me nevertheless turn now to my use cases, share some examples of workflows that I'm doing, pretty much nearly every day now. Okay. So what do I do with AI now? Let me start with a caveat, just checking where I am in the slides. So first of all, I don't, and I have not developed my own large language model or trained a chatbot myself now at this stage. I have interest in doing that kind of a thing, but as of now, I've been really working mostly with ChatGPT the most. I've experimented with some of the other tools, Copilot and Claude. I've definitely looked at Transcribus, and I want to work more with those kinds of text recognition software packages. And I can say more about the tools, but basically, I'm an off-the-shelf ChatGPT user at the moment. So rather than demonstrating any novel tool today, I'm going to talk about the workflows. I do believe that we need lessons in prompt engineering, so to speak, and this is something our discipline historians can work on together. But for now, here are some simple ideas. Faced with that ready when you are screen of ChatGPT, what do you actually do, right? So I'll share two use cases that I do most times I work now. First of text searching. And then text organizing. But first, even before getting into those, I want to interrupt myself and share a basic intuition about the different ways that I perceive people to be talking about using AI, in their teaching and research. I know that most in this audience who would come to an afternoon talk like this will find this elementary, but for the AI hesitant or uninitiated, there's a basic piece to grasp about these research workflows. And the key intuition is this. AI is not only about generating text out of the large language model's training data, right? It is also, and for me, kind of instead, about leveraging the training data to transform data that I feed it to the GPT, that I feed to the GPT. So to be sure, the chatbot is good at answering your questions about history, right? And you can use it that way. This is what I consider route A. Open your GPT, start querying about your research topic, and in effect, you have a research assistant who has read an obviously amazing volume of historical literature. When you work this way, you're leveraging the training data on your questions and ideas, using that training data and the predictive model as a body of knowledge itself, right? And, I love reflections on how powerful this is becoming. Recently in the New Yorker, D. Graham Burnett had a really great reflection about mostly classroom use of the AI tools, but he summarized this kind of engagement with the GPT, explaining that the output often, when not hallucinating, of course, can give you startlingly interesting insights into historical questions. Burnett is a historian, and again, I highly recommend this article for those thinking about these issues. But my own practice and workflows begin with a key intuition, which is that the GPT becomes truly transformative for research when you use the training data and predictive model not so much as a body of knowledge in itself, but instead as a tool for analyzing and transforming primary and secondary sources that you bring to it, right? So I've tried to illustrate that here in this graphic. Again, I know this is pretty elementary for many users, but again, in my travels, I hear, commentary that makes me think that not everybody has sort of thought about this particular key move that for me is so essential in leveraging the power of the tools as a historian. This is what I call Route B. In Route B, the training data is not exactly the output that you're interested in, not in and of itself. Instead, the analysis is focused squarely on sources that you identify and you control, and importantly, that you verify, right? Whose provenance and sort of, basic, let's say, epistemological status you are kind of in control of. That's not necessarily true of all the stuff that the GPT gives you out of its sort of black box of predictive modeling and the corpus that it was trained on. So in any case, in Route B, we've got a key distinction. So I want to make sure I begin with the premise that I'm on Route B almost all the time in my work, right? And this is how another way to visualize it. I give it material, primary and secondary sources. I can talk about more of that as we go. And then what I intuit to be happening here is I'm using the power of the GPT to really digest and transform the data that I've supplied it, right? So this is where those metaphors about the research assistant make actually a lot of intuitive sense to me. This research assistant reads really fast, right? This research assistant does not get bored. This research assistant knows a tremendous amount of coding, right? And et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. So this is kind of where I spend most of my time, kind of using the tool to engage the primary and secondary sources that I'm working with. So my cases. The most frequent use that I have for AI is what I'd call data mining. Again, I could go on and on about why efficiency in this area of historical research is useful. When searching for a specific theme in a broad corpus of primary sources, especially secondary sources as well, digitized sources in general have made us much more productive, right? Even before any kind of AI or algorithmic sophistication, thanks to just basic keyword and other kinds of automated search. But AI is a definite step up. Feeding a corpus to an AI, you set the tool to extract quotations around a specific theme, even as you instruct it on why you're interested in that theme. And the results are valuable for two reasons, right? First, the speed and the comprehensiveness, and second, in the quality and analysis of the output. So let me give you an example, and I can give you a parenthesis here that I'm going to give two examples that are not exactly the examples that I started out to supply in this talk. There's an interesting and actually very germane reason for that has to do with copyright. But suffice it to say, I wanted to be able to share all of this as well as the chat that generated this example. I wasn't able to do this because I learned of my copyright challenge last minute. In fact, last night, quite late last night. So with apologies, I don't have links to share with the audience on these particular examples, and they are a little bit bare bones, but at least they give the headlines of what I'm trying to communicate. So an example, I'm really lucky to be involved in an ongoing project about a delegation of indigenous travelers who visited France in 1725. We are coming up on the anniversary, the 300th anniversary of this visit. And so that's the occasion, part of the occasion for this research. This delegation that traveled to Paris included a chief of what's now the Peoria Nation, or Pewalia Nation. And among the places that these travelers went was this palace outside of Paris, Fontainebleau, which was the hunting chateau for the king. And it was here that Shikakwa, this chief of the then Mechigamia tribe, hunted with a young 15-year-old Louis XV. Right, so they went on a hunting trip. And we are in our group project trying to explore aspects of, well, lots of aspects of this whole visit in Paris, but in particular, I've become quite interested in this hunting expedition. What was this hunting encounter like? To answer that, we can explore the very different meanings of hunting for French and Indigenous Americans in the 18th century, right around this period. We know a lot about that in the European perspective from textual sources, lots of visual culture and stuff that, in fact, at that Palace of Fontainebleau, there's quite a lot of interesting material to mine to kind of get at the French imaginary and how that side of this cultural encounter interpreted the experience. For the Indians' perspective, we have lots of sources as well. Of course, mostly European visitors to indigenous villages in this period. And such sources are long and voluminous. I've read lots of them over the course of my research career. And I know that they contain good descriptions of hunting, but those depictions are mixed with many, many other topics, right? And our sources are increasingly digitized, but they are not well indexed. This is the kind of work I've been doing for years, right? Trying to use this corpus, extensive corpus, not infinite corpus of materials, eyewitness descriptions of Europeans traveling to North America in this period. I've been looking at this corpus for a really long time, often very laboriously producing spreadsheets and hand coding and hand tagging the output of my needle in a haystack searching as I've sifted by hand or by crude keyword searching through the corpus. Well, this is the kind of thing that the GPT excels at, right? So here is a simple workflow that, again, I find myself doing this kind of thing all the time. Take these texts, of which I now have quite well cleaned up, text files, feed them into the GPT, and then prompt for effective text mining. And here I use lots of different techniques the GPT can use and can deploy, lots of different, from extended keyword searching to topic modeling, and other kinds of methods. Help, let it generate some output. The caveat is that it typically goes pretty slow and iteratively through this. So you have a lot of kind of engagement at this stage to sort of say this, not that. The more context that you give to the chatbot, I think, given the way the predictive model works, the more interestingly the ChatGPT can kind of generate, let's say those tags and the codes that it assigns to different quotations that it extracts. You have to evaluate and confirm your results and reprompt all the way along. But over the course, and again, with apologies for not being able to share the raw material that produced this analysis, nor the transcript of the chat. I'm quite accustomed now, after 25 minutes, half hour worth of this kind of engagement, using the text that I feed the GPT to receiving spreadsheets, sometimes, with hundreds of entries of material that gets extracted. And what, I would share, and highlight here, this contextual commentary that in this particular engagement, the chat generated can be more or less useful, but the type, practice interpretation in column E on this resulting chart, that's an example of the kind of coding that it can do sort of in an automated way, as it sort of sifts through quotations, depending on what kind of instructions that you give it. And again, I have found this to be, quite useful. The result is uneven, to be sure. There are definite instances that are probably, not pertinent to the research task. That's true in this spreadsheet if you looked at the whole thing. But conversely, when using topic models, there are often instances that show up in my results that I would not have found otherwise. And I know that's true because many of these texts I have read repeatedly and I really know well what's in them, So, or I think I know well what's in them. So again, pluses and minuses, and I've seen over months of use that these are becoming, even more refined in the kind of output that they can generate. This is not replacing laborious reading for me, but it is cutting out a certain amount of work and certainly augmenting the work that I do in this kind of, again, needle in the haystack searching of primary sources, which is a big part, right? And a very laborious part of what is, I do in my practice. So, and I just, I also, in doing some background reading for this presentation, I've found some texts, in particular this article that was just a couple weeks ago by Bill Wasik in the New York Times. I think the title of it, I should have written the title in the slide, is is AI is rewriting the past literally, and it's about historians leveraging AI, not just for text searching, but for idea generation, and it's a pretty fascinating article. But I found this to be a well said and relatable text or quotation for what I'm talking about, right? So to leave this particular case study and go on to the second one, I want to talk a little bit about data transformation. Again, here I wish I had the example that I would have shown without this copyright concern that got flagged last night. I probably want to say a little bit more about that maybe after I finish my prepared comments, because it is interesting. But let me share this case study. My second case study is in data transformation. If GPTs make document search and what I call needle in a haystack researching more efficient, the other thing that they do very well is digest and transform data. Primary sources and secondary sources alike bury lots of data inside of either narrative or in analysis, right? Extracting that data is frequently very useful, and the GPT excels at this. What kind of data am I talking about? Well, genealogy for one. Family connections in a narrative or in a secondary source, especially. Chronology, right? Timelines, geography, biographical information. These are the ones most frequently on my mind as I'm doing, especially sort of scanning type research, 10,000-foot research. In the past, this would slow me down. I would have to kind of hit the brakes a little bit. And again, the intuition for me is I feel like I would have to kind of datafy such information, right? Create some structure or transform out of narrative or transform out of analysis into whatever it was, a tabular data, spreadsheet data, linear data, whatever. I would have to take extensive notes, then reorganize those notes, often, again, spreadsheets and databases. AI, right off the shelf at the moment, is getting really, really good at extracting that kind of material efficiently. So here's this example that I will share. Simple and straightforward and short, but one that I do like all the time now. And I hope it illustrates the point. I'm working a little bit on the American Revolution, as many early American historians are doing right now, given another anniversary that's coming down the road. Since I study the West, and there was a big portion of the American Revolution that had to do with the West, although it doesn't get commemorated as much. I'm trying to kind of add to that conversation and look at the colonialism that's inside of this, ironically inside of this war for colonial independence, right? At the same time that we have a war for colonial independence, we are also, this move to the Western lands is partially a kind of a colonial act in its own right. So George Rogers Clark is a really important personage in this story, and during the American Revolution, he led a couple of companies of Virginia soldiers down the Ohio River, starting in Louisville, to occupy what were British and French colonies in what was called the Illinois country. He recounted that expedition in a narrative he wrote in 1789, just as the Constitution was being ratified. And I think it's kind of interesting that Clark, this is a tangent, but it's kind of waving his arms and saying, don't forget about this part of the story as you're, sort of reframing, the meaning of the revolution, or starting to write the meaning of the revolution, in Philadelphia and in the newly independent Eastern Seaboard. So it's a detailed narrative, and I've read it many times, but sometimes, again, you want the big picture, and you want a way to kind of visualize or kind of organize the information in this narrative. So this is my research challenge that, again, just one of many moments when I've kind of deployed this, but just to be specific, I wanted to organize this unstructured text about historical events. I wanted to organize this unstructured and out of copyright text into a structured chronological and geographical table that I could then visualize for this kind of group study that we're working on. So I took this narrative, which has a digitized version in HathiTrust. I cleaned up the text, fed it to the GPT, and I would say that the result of this particular workflow, and I'll share the prompts that I fed to the GPT, took all of literally a few minutes, and I do this regularly with the material that I work with. It's really kind of routine at the moment. Pull out the key events. Give us as much detail as you can on the geographical locations important in this text. Focus in on the expedition. Give attach timeline data to the locations. I'll put the locations to a CSV table. Prepare it as a KML. Put the KML into Google. Create yourself a nice visualization of space and time in this narrative. And so this is the kind of thing that generates in a matter of seconds. All you have to do is ask for certain kinds of outputs. You can, ask for much more detail on many of these locations, but the most important thing is the georeferencing. I spent a long time learning how to code texts to georeference them by hand, right? And now I feel like, this is a real value added for, again, it's an instance of transforming historical data for a kind of analysis that I frequently do in my practice. So, in conclusion, in this summer of AI, I wanted to be able to articulate some of the workflows for sharing and discussion. I wanted to be able to articulate this intuition, right? That really what this work is about, or what these workflows are about, is leveraging that training data and predictive model, not as a source of information or as a body of information that I'm directly kind of engaged with, but one that I can leverage to transform and analyze quickly the information, again, that I'm most interested in, and that are the sources that I'm frequently in consultation with. So, I think there are some practical tips that I could offer. I think I do much better with the text files, especially well-cleaned ones, versus PDFs. I really have become quite discursive in the kinds of instructions that I write in my engagement with the GPT. Very frequently, I feel like I kind of become quite self-conscious. It's like, why am I doing this? I mean, I understand the mechanism in the algorithm. It doesn't care, right, that I'm saying it the way that I'm saying it, but I wind up with quite well considered or carefully considered and nuanced questions. And I do believe that pays dividends in the kind of output that I get. When I'm asking for certain kinds of analysis with that needle in the haystack searching, I have learned to be specific about the ones that I think would be most promising. I'm prepared to be quite iterative with the results, and to go back and back and back again, and to start over often, because it will, if it gets down the road with a topic model and then you ask it to switch its methods, it's not going to be easy for the software to sort of adjust and add the new data into the existing output that it has already generated. So a lot of times I find myself just saying, okay, I'm going to just go back and start again. And then, this last piece is the one where I feel like a lot of people that I talk to about these practices get frustrated, naturally so, because very frequently in one of these encounters with the GPT, I find that, I was clear on my instructions, and I know there's a lot of material relative to what I've asked for in the particular material that I've fed the GPT, and it has only given me a very small output. And that requires a follow-up. And, it can be frustrating, but and curious that it, even on the paid version of the subscription, you have to say, no, I want this to be a comprehensive sweep. Do the whole thing. And you sometimes need to go back several times. I'm not sure. This is a little bit of a brainstorm that I'm sharing right now, and I'd love to know why that is. But in any case, that's a bit of practical advice for prompt engineering. I would love to say that over time, where this is heading is some kind of a cookbook that I can share in my seminars. I think that's needed. I think that would be valued. Kind of the experiential, hands-on. This is the experience, and these are the lessons that I've kind of been able to distill from engaging with the tools. But for now, I'll leave it there, and welcome any questions or comments and thoughts. Thanks again for the chance to share.
We have a question from the audience.
Excellent.
If you started your training to be a historian today, would your particular use of AI prevent the development of any key skills? There's more.
Yes.
Would it let you skip any painful yet important learning moments, or is AI simply saving time by doing menial tasks for you?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and thank you for the question, whoever asked it. I mean, it's I think about that, of course, in relationship to how we should be using these tools in our practices as teachers, right? Because I do feel empowered by the tools, but I am also quite confident in, the kind of perspective, judgment, intuition, and just subject area knowledge. I mean, there's a lot of situated knowledge that comes from being a researcher in a specific area over 20 years, where, not only do I feel like I'm not cutting corners because the work's already been invested. So I don't believe I'm missing anything today. I also am confident that I'm pretty good at picking up the mistakes. And, let's face it, that's another elephant in the room here for historians, is that when it outputs something and you're like, wait a second, where did that come from? And it turns out to be a complete, hallucination. Then, I get disturbed, but I catch it. I hope I catch it. I'm trusting but verifying on this as a rule. But to the question about if I were starting over, yeah, I think it's a really valuable question, and at the moment, I mean, I think it's a live question. I think it's part of the reason why so many people in my discipline are so hesitant about it, because we do value what we've picked up as researchers through that hard-won, painful labor. And so would it just save time? Yes, I am applauding it for saving me time, but I recognize there might be downsides to that if it were done in replacement of, as opposed to augmenting what I've got in terms of situated knowledge and experience.
We have another question. One I wanted to thank, that was Aristio Perez who asked that question.
Okay.
The next question is from Catherine Sawyer. Have you ever told it that it is playing X? Like you say, it is this is the ChatGPT. It is a graduate student working for you on a project and the qualities of a graduate student. I wonder if that would help it take on characteristic of the researcher and provide better outcomes and richer quotes. I find that when I give it a persona, I get a better output.
Huh. That's fascinating. No, I have not. But I will try it. I definitely, so one of the workflow demonstrations that I might have shared without copyright concerns, that I realized last night, I was gonna use one of my own pieces, one of my own articles, which I was gonna walk through a demonstration, but I'm actually not sure that would have, passed muster, because I just don't really know where the copyright rules are on that. So for that reason, I stuck with open, definitely out of copyright texts that I use, which is really most of my practice. But to the question, when I do feed scholarly articles like my own work to the GPT, some things I don't assign it a persona, but I ask, I would have done this today, rewrite that article as another scholar, right? Using the lens of another kind of interpretive lens. And that I find quite interesting. I do find, one of the big challenges for, historical academic writing, interpretive analytical writing is to kind of create and represent a conversation into which your argument is an intervention, right? And, kind of distilling that down, there are, it's a creative process. It's a really important part of the intellectual work of defining a project. And I have really gotten a lot out of that particular functionality of AI. Like, okay, this is what Morrissey said. Now rewrite that same data or whatever, whatever it's gleaning out of the article, and now pretend you're scholar X, right? And write it again, right? And I obviously would feed it somebody that I know in my travels has a different approach and a different framework for the interpretation, and then kind of see, and it's quite effective, and it's I think to the question about personas, yeah, it's a playful way to engage with it that I think does actually have some serious value.
There's another one. Is there somebody in? Oh,
I'll wait.
okay. Thank you. Julia Sabin asks, do you have input on scoping the amount of information you feed to ChatGPT and the strategies to work with a large number of papers? For example, topic modeling from the 100 to 200 research papers and articles.
Yeah, well, the answer to that is I haven't done that, and not sure why really. I have focused a lot of my use, shared use cases from primary sources today, in part because that's where I do focus a lot of, my engagement. I have not, used it quite as much for this kind of synthesis of a massive corpus of what in history we call secondary literature, right? The sort of scholarly conversation, and topic modeling that literature. Yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen some effective use of topic modeling for that kind of distillation of a historiographical kind of conversation, but it's I haven't done it myself. So I'd be interested to know what the questioner has in mind, or if it's been effective in their case.
So I was wondering, it kind of relates to the first question, so feel free to say if you feel like it's the same answer. But I was really struck by 3 months on one sentence from your advisor and that motivating you. But yet now we're talking about workflows and technology to speed up some processes.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that time? Do you answer more questions? Do you answer a question more deeply?
Yeah.
Do you combine questions? Like, are you still motivated? Like, what's that connecting back to that passion part of what you described about the 3 months? What is happening to that now that you're playing with these workflows?
Yeah.
How does that inform any of your practices?
Yeah.
Potentially including these.
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob, and thanks. I mean, yeah, in truth, what was motivating about that to me may not have been so much, it took me 3 months to do that, as much as I felt like the analytical creativity, because when you're going to invest that much time, he was very clear about like the stakes of the question and the method, that he was applying, and kind of what the outcome of what was inspiring to me about it was this kind of methodological creativity. And I've always been interested in that as a historian. I mean, the cliche is that historical research is detective work. It is argumentation, and it is a conversation, a scholarly conversation as well. But I think from the standpoint of like what you do as a historian, right? To me, I've always really been interested in sort of like, oh man, that's a really creative approach to an archive to kind of glean new information. And that's kind of why I was inspired by that social history moment, and kind of why I went down the road of, I showed you that network analysis graph that I made. It was all about like, oh, can I leverage that? In part because I felt like it was a kind of a novel thing. It was a new way of looking at these records. It made those records speak and tell a story that they otherwise would not have been able to tell, right? To be able to kind of visualize it that way and use that particular analysis. Otherwise, it was just a big list of names and who was godparent to who, and et cetera, et cetera. And then like, okay. It's the AI thing to me is coming back to what are you going to do with the extra time that you save if you don't have to me, the answer is I'm drawn to this in part because it affords more opportunity anyway for kind of that analytical and methodological experimentation, right? So when I say that John was really clear about the stakes, like here's what I'm going to do and here's why I'm going to do it and here's the payoff. I mean, you kind of have to be, because you don't want to spend all that time and then get a, I think they call it in other disciplines, a null result, right? Something that didn't pay off, it didn't show anything, which obviously when you're doing that kind of empirical type analysis, you are risking that, at the end of the day, we're interested in change as historians, right? So generational change, a big difference between generation 1 and generation 3 is wow. Okay, so why is that? And let's explain that. But let's say there wasn't a change and you spent 3 months and it's like the same. So with the AI, I believe we can kind of go maybe a little further down the road of exploring whether that change is there before fully committing to it, maybe. It just affords, I think, an opportunity to be more methodologically creative that way. Yeah. So that's what I would say about, yeah.
I got it. Using AI for historical purposes is a fascinating idea. But my question for you is, in your opinion, what is the potential, as we move forward, the potential impact for accuracy and the validity of what is being recorded, like moving forward? Is there going to be like deterioration if it becomes more mainstream to use a workflow like this, that there might be accuracy deterioration? And then also, I guess another question that builds off of that, I'm talking about a speed where our world prioritizes speed above everything else, like
Yeah.
move faster all the time, how that could potentially impact people's belief in what is being presented. So if things move so fast, so quickly, are people going to go, well, I don't trust it because it was generated too quickly? Or is like how do you see historians trusting the work that they're seeing prior,
Yeah.
like as we move forward?
Yeah. Both excellent questions. That accuracy piece. I have a colleague, John Randolph, who thinks a lot about digitized sources and the sort of digital record. And I think that in terms of the deterioration of accuracy or quality that these tools may inflict on that record, which is already disembodied and often decontextualized, and yeah, I absolutely share that concern. And yeah, the related point about how fast the dream of engaging with these tools, the speed component of it. I guess I don't know what I'd say exactly, other than, I mean, in my own practice, I feel like I preserve the basic kind of ethics and values as I engage with the tool, and I think that's crucial, right? I mean, I think that has to be front of mind. And hopefully, back to Jamie's question, or the question that Jamie asked, quoting from somebody who joined online, like, hopefully I'm not losing something by gaining that extra speed, in kind of, again, the datafying process. But so I think these are just excellent questions. I agree with the sentiment behind them, and I think that that's a really critical part of the conversation, moving forward, about whether and how we use these you know, how we teach them to students and deploy them in our practices. So yeah, thank you.
One last quick follow-up. I guess in having said all that, especially in like your own work that you do in your own teaching, what are the things that you're looking out for, that you're trying to make sure that I'm making sure, like how you keep yourself accurate, keep yourself accountable? You're talking about like morality and those things. So what would you offer as advice to those here or those online, or like how to keep the work that you're doing authentic?
Yeah. Authentic meaning that you mean kind of verified, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is the, you know, human in the loop, sort of the visualization that we often see. And for me, that means, you know, I actually just will go ahead and confirm if I find in one of these AI generated tables that I frequently now generate, you know, wow, that's a striking fact. That's a striking piece of information. I want to make sure, you know, that's right. I do that all. I find that that's a sort of totally essential part of the workflow. And you know, it resembles other parts of, you know, I mean, the practice before AI, you know, came on board. We do that all the time anyway as scholars, and I think that that's pretty, you know, pretty much baked in. You know, check every quote before you send it off, and from the standpoint of producing scholarship, but also, you know, in terms of forming your impressions of the past and you know, your understanding. I think these tools do get us into a space where we do have to be actively monitoring for this, what did you call it? You know, the degradation of the,
Yeah.
you know, of, you know, the veracity of the stuff that we're looking at. Yeah.
That's like the inference, where it's inferring a little too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the hallucination, you know, we have barely touched that. I know that that's got to be the issue that presents the biggest hang up to many people who start with it, and then, you know, there's that initial excitement, and then that happens once or twice, and you're like, no way, no way. Yeah, but I don't have any, you know, you know, systematic,
I don't think anyone
yeah,
does.
answer to that yet. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great insight and great kind of personal reflection on this. And I even see this with like, as we look at maybe open-ended student data and try to make sense of it, although we have to go through privacy stuff, even if that's just a little side thing. But thanks for presenting, and thanks everybody for joining us online. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh.
I have another question, if you don't mind, and it's okay if it's off the record. So, question of accuracy, okay? So AI is now so capable of ingesting an almost indiscriminate amount of information. And so I'm talking about present day history. Or the alternative histories that are being generated.
Yes.
And how do you guard against that data being analyzed? Or how do we program or monitor the AI that analyzes all these alternative facts and histories, that it doesn't contaminate and doesn't contribute to the proliferation of false history?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, again, that seems it's not something that I've given a whole lot of thought to, aside from just, you know, what I kind of read, you know, not related to my own practice and my own engagement with the tools, but kind of in a more existential sense, you know, for thinking about what the tools are doing, you know, and then of course the percentage of the text that the training models are ingesting that is itself generated by AI, so that it becomes that kind of, you know, contamination, I think is a good word for that, right?
And I wasn't specifically referring to text based documents, also video clips and
Yes.
video reports and podcasts and things of that sort that
Yeah.
potentially contain a lot of false information.
Yeah.
And generates brand new, almost hard to distinguish from reality video and ultimate.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, I mean, again, from the standpoint of how I'm engaging with it, I feel, I feel like those issues are, kind of remote from what I've been sharing today, but also relevant in the sense that, it is all at the end of the day, if it's research and you're there to, the purpose there is to discover new information. And there's a kind of an epistemological stance there, right? That must be defended and protected.
And I understand
Yeah.
that, you're in a different position, your research, deals with facts that happened 300 years ago, and that data is codified and has been established.
Yes.
And there's a corpus of verifiable information and reputable sources. But, and I'm asking you to speculate a little bit, but people who deal with modern present day history and that, the amount of information that's out there, and some of it is truthful and some of it is flat out very, very wrong. And to it, to an AI tool, perhaps it doesn't really matter whether, it's all to it. It is all
100%, yeah.
computer code, okay, whether it's truthful or not, historically speaking. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I absolutely, these are the big existential questions around it that I'm, kind of fascinated to continue to think about and learn about. Yeah.